Beautiful introduction.
Yes, thank you so much.
Why don't we just get started? And since she has done such a beautiful introduction, I won't go over old ground. She did a beautiful job with that. So first of all, obviously, Chantha's memoir is a book about the human cost of war and violence and genocide, but it's also about hope and resilience and reclaiming your life after profound losses. So just to avoid traumatizing everyone here, we're going to focus on the hope and humanity aspects of her story, and just give you a little bit of a behind the scenes look at how a collaboration like this works. It requires lots of time, care, and mutual trust, and a whole lot of honest, candid negotiations. So let's start by we'll tell you just a little bit about how this project began. I'll start and then Chantha will pick up. So I'm a journalist in Nashville, and in 2011, I was doing a monthly column for this local magazine called Her Nashville. It was a women's magazine, and I got assigned to do a magazine story about a Cambodian social entrepreneur who was based in Cambodia, of course, and a donor, a philanthropist named Anne Walling, who is based. Her family foundation and she are both based in Nashville, which is where I live. So I did this magazine story on their partnership and about this project in Cambodia. And then a few weeks later, Anne Walling, the philanthropist, contacted me and said, "Would you like to do a larger project?" And she proposed some kind of a book. And eventually I said yes. So Chantha, would you pick up that story and just talk a little bit about your partnership with Anne Walling and that long-term collaboration that you two have together?
Hi everyone. I'm Chantha and I'm from Cambodia and I'm still living in Cambodia. Uh, Unwilling is one of many donors for our projects, Tang Women's Development Center. But Anne had paid a very deep interest and attention to keeping us blooming and continue to grow. So in a way, and keeps sending donations to our center whenever needed. Just one email, and we receive support from Anne. And she called it giving us some air to breathe. It's just simple. It's money. It's not easy to find, but she just sends some air. And she has given me a very special respect and love, and especially from a woman. So when she introduced Kim to me, and she wanted me to tell the story, which was I said no so many times to Anne's questions. But when I met Kim, again, another woman, and I feel like she's sweet, she's very, very polite. So I said, yeah, maybe I can talk to her. And that's how it started.
Right. And so the next part of that story is we started a correspondence via email. And then I made my first trip to Cambodia to visit with her for a couple of weeks in 2012. So we had only met one time, and here I was appearing to ask her these deeply personal questions that were so difficult. And so she was traveling around the country with her job at the time, and we jumped in the car and went all over the country, and and we talked a lot. The discussions were very painful for her, and I immediately saw that. And so there was one night we were staying in a village, and we were sitting together drinking a beer by this river, and she expressed her concerns to me, her reservations about doing this project. She said, first of all, why will anyone care about me? I am one of millions of people who shares this story. And my first thought was, well, I think you're extraordinary and I care, so other people will too. But she also talked about the pain of reliving these memories over and over. And so we talked really, really honestly and openly about whether to do the project. And she said, I don't want to just write I don't want to expose my tragedies for everyone to read just for that purpose. So I said, well, what if this isn't, you know, a tragedy story? What if this is about hope and resilience? And what if we tell it through food? What if we make this a love letter and something that honors your mother and your sister and their recipes? And the reason that we had that idea was that for the whole 2 weeks, whenever we would have formal interviews, it would be very painful and difficult for her. But when we were sharing a meal or when she was cooking something beautiful, the memories came out naturally. And so it felt like that's the way her story should also come out on the page. And so I want to hand this back off to you, Chantha. When we talked about that, and even now, why do you think it made sense to you to tell your story through your food memories and your family recipes?
Because if I tell you a story about my pain, um, it's like impossible for me to do so without crying and uh, living in stress for, if not weeks, it for days to recover, and every single time. And but when talking about food, I it at least brings me back some good memory of the time in my mother's kitchen in Battambang, and that helps me to heal, and that's something I feel normal, like everyone else has a family and they have a kitchen and their mother cook for them. So I feel like I'm not just the refugee with losing everything, but at least I have the past that normal. That's the reason I would like to bring all the recipes from my mother's recipes back to myself, to my children, and now we send it out to the world.
Thank you, Chantha. Let's have Clara read a section from the prologue that kind of explains the way we're telling your story.
Thank you, Kim. In 1975, the Khmer Rouge informed the Cambodian people that we had no history, but we knew it was a lie. Cambodia has a rich past, a mosaic of flavors from near and far. South Indian traders gave us Buddhism, an alphabet, and spicy curries. China brought rice noodles and astrology. The French colonizers passed on a love of strong coffee, pâté flan, and a light, crusty baguette. We lifted the best taste from everywhere and added our own. Sour pickled fruits and vegetables, the famous kampot peppercorn, and the most distinctive flavor of all, prahok, Cambodia's infamous fermented fish paste. Even now, I can taste my own history. In shimmering sense memories of my mother's homemade fish sauce, the soup noodles she rolled out in her hands, and the pâté de foie she served to guests. We Cambodians do not like to bear our scars. We share an unspeakable history, so we rarely speak of it. But I will tell you my story in these pages, if only to prove that the past cannot be extinguished. I have done my best to remember it all, but some months have gone dark in my mind. This is the truth of my story as faithfully as I am able to render it. Now that I finally have a kitchen of my own, I've found a sweeter way to resurrect the past, rekindling the aromas of my mother's cooking. When I stoke the charcoal grill for roasting pork ribs or stir coconut milk into my fish amok, I revert to the age when I tasted the dish for the first time, and my mother's image comes flooding back. When I'm cooking or eating, it's less painful to remember. And so in working on this book, my co-writer and I came together in our respective kitchens. At her house in America, and at mine in Phnom Penh, where I live now, I cooked and remembered, and she scribbled in a notebook and ate. The stories poured out in their own order, according to whatever I was craving. If I saw a lovely fresh fish in the market, I told her a fish story. Over a Pim's cup with lime, I spoke of starved malarial sugar and lime cravings. The same memory might bring laughter or tears, depending on the taste of it that day. I will tell you my story, but I insist on telling it with hands busy and the kitchen full of enticing aromas. I'll cook for you throughout the telling. You'll see for yourself that the past cannot be erased so easily.
Thank you, Clara. That's beautiful. If you all don't already know, well, I guess you know from the introduction that Clara is the audiobook narrator, and she did such a beautiful job. So I would encourage you to consider downloading the audiobook and listening to her voice for many, many hours. That last part of the section, you're reading about how people who have endured trauma, and especially Cambodians and Cambodian American refugees, they all have a different relationship to how they handle the past. And maybe you growing up in Cambodia have experienced this yourself, Clara. Like some people talk about these things and some people choose not to. So can you just tell us a little bit about what you see there, like even maybe in your own family? Your mom has told some of the stories. You've heard some of these stories growing up, right?
Yes. I know that, sorry, Kim. I know that people can't really hear me. Is it better now?
We can move it up closer.
Yeah.
Just scooch it up a little bit closer and I'll turn up the gain. How's that? Try.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that. I think I like you as well. I hear the stories throughout my childhood, and oftentimes when we're having dinner together at home, and it can be quite difficult. And I think a lot of people with parents or grandparents who had gone through trauma or had become refugees because of the war in Cambodia or in other places, it can be really difficult to hear all the time. And as a child, it can be really difficult to figure out a way to help your parents feel better. When I was younger, I don't think I was fond of those moments all the time because it was really difficult to watch my mom cry and hear those stories. But I think I have seen the difference before and after she had put these words on paper. I think in a way it was a way for my mother to heal, and it was also a way for me to understand what she went through a lot better and how to help her feel better, to be there and listen and to be sympathetic and empathetic about her experiences. But I also have my dad, who I think some people can probably attest to this. People deal with trauma differently. My mom shares her experiences and stories, but my dad never talked about it. And so everything that I do know about him was either through, snippets of it through my mom's stories, but most of it is actually through this book. But I'm grateful that I got to learn about that part of his life.
Thank you, Clara. Well, let's go to one of Chantha's favorite recipes, Clara. And if you all have a copy of the book, we're going to go to page 19. So, Clara, would you read there?
The dishes I loved best when I was small were the ones that took the longest to make. My puppy sense told me that time equaled love and love equaled deliciousness. On the time continuum, instant noodles tasted careless, like nothing at all. The guitiao noodle makers' hand-cut me were far superior. But the slowest and best noodles of all came from my mother's kitchen. They went into Mai's baba bankan, a comforting thick soup with chewy handmade rice flour noodles. In Vietnamese, bánh means cake or bread, and can means soup. But in Khmer, we call the dish baba bankan, essentially cake soup porridge. The base can be pork or chicken stock, and you can add your choice of protein, from pork knuckle to shrimp or crab meat. But the springy, thick rice noodles play the starring role. If you want to prepare Battambang the way my mother used to make it, you'll need to clear your schedule. First, soak white rice overnight. In the morning, grind the rice into a cotton bag and place a stone on it to force the water out. When the dough becomes thick and a little bit sticky, cook it in a large frying pan. Keep stirring the dough until it's half cooked through, then smash and mix the cooked raw dough together. The dough is hot, but you have to squeeze it with your hands for more than an hour to make it soft, smooth, and very fine. Next, shape the noodles. Tear off blueberry-sized chunks of dough and roll them one by one into identical cylinders. Nothing less than perfect will do. This will most likely take several hours, depending on how many soup eaters you plan to feed and how many hands are available to roll noodles. Devouring the noodles will take a tiny fraction of the time required to prepare them. I am joking. I know that you have no intention of grinding the flour yourself. Even I don't do it that way anymore. And what's worse, I cut the noodles with scissors instead of rolling them each by hand. Mai would strongly disapprove. My mother despised the flavor of shortcuts. I suspect that Battambang was Mai's favorite, not despite, but because of the investment of both time and effort. Cooking something complicated took longer, which meant more togetherness, more devotion, more love. Those were my favorite times, those special occasion days when Mai and Chantu prepared something extra difficult, dishes that took them many hours or even days to prepare.
Thank you. I love the line, "My mother despised the flavor of shortcuts." Chanta, your mother had very exacting standards for what was correct, and you do too, right? Is that right?
Uh, and sometimes suddenly I see myself turn into my mother.
Right. Well, can you paint a picture for us of what it was like back in your mother's kitchen when you were a little girl and everyone was sitting around and rolling out those noodles by hand, one by one? Just tell us what it was like.
Um, what I remember most is my mother talk more than usual when she's cooking. It means she's very happy too. Um, and then she focused on teaching my sister how to make it better if my sister made any mistake. So that's when also the time she spent with her children, and she trained her children as well. So that's a very special memory for me. The most valuable um, things we received from our mother.
The slowest noodles of all, slow noodles. We'll come back to that idea a little bit later. But Chanta, what are some other favorite recipes of yours that you specifically loved because they took a lot of time to prepare?
Um, so many. It means the whole recipes of my mother's are my favorite, but amok is something that made her special. Um, and the spring roll also through my whole life, whenever I made it, uh, um, the people who I cooked for said this is unique. I never had it anywhere like this. So the fried spring rolls and amok, and it's not special just from Battambang, but it's from my mother. Yeah, so I feel very special, double, triple special about it. Yeah, and I keep repeating it, and I'm very proud to cook again and again for friends. And even the Princess Marie of Denmark said that's the best in Cambodia all over, 10 years she's been eating amok. So made me even prouder.
And speaking as one of your friends, I can say that we feel very lucky when you cook these dishes for us. But also whenever your mother made and whenever you make the spring rolls, suddenly there's an outbreak of thievery. People always keep stealing bites and stealing the spring rolls until they're too full to eat dinner.
And that's my memory about my mother's kitchen. We keep just running in and out and picking and stealing, and then she said, "Don't do that, don't do that." But we can't stop ourselves, one after another. And then we finally sit down at the table, and I said, "I'm full." So she was very upset about it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Cambodian food. I know that the people in Lowell will already probably know all about this and will recognize some of the dishes and the foods that you've mentioned already. But for people who maybe have never tried Cambodian food, Clara, can you kind of give us a very basic description of what it's like?
Yeah, I think a good start or description of Cambodian food, I'll probably talk about two ingredients. One is called krương, and it's the base of Cambodian cooking. We put it in our stir fries or soups. We even mix them with ground meat and grill it over charcoal fire. And krương, the literal translation is ingredients. And the base for it usually consists of lemongrass and galangal, garlic, shallots, turmeric, and depending on whether you're making a red or yellow krương, you can add red chili paste to it as well. And the other ingredient that we use is prahok, and it was referenced in the prologue earlier as well. And prahok is fermented fish paste, and it has this. We use it as we would use salt. We add it to our soups as well. We make dipping sauces out of it, and it's made from tiny river fish called trairil, and you can find it in Tonle Sap, Bang Tonle Sap, which is this beautiful, huge lake in the northern part of Cambodia, next in the Siem Reap, and every year tons and tons of fish are turned gutted and turned into fish paste and distributed across Cambodia, and every single household has a jar of prahok in their kitchen. And if you've never had prahok or have smelled prahok before, it's an acquired taste, and it has a very strong flavor, but it's absolutely delicious, and it can turn any dish into it reminds me of home every time I smell prahok. I don't really cook it in my apartment just because I think I would probably scare all my neighbors, and they probably would think something is happening in my kitchen and check up on me. But my mom makes a very delicious prahok ang. She mix krương and pork belly and prahok, and she wrap it in banana leaf and grill it over charcoal fire, and it's very good.
And also, there are different regional specialties, right? So
Yes,
tell us about some of those. Like, so you grew up, tell us where you grew up and what the cuisine was like there.
Yeah, and I think every household, people cook food differently in different households, and I think that's the case in any cuisine. But for Cambodia, we also have regional cuisines as well. So I grew up in Stan Tranh, which is in the northern part of the country, and we eat very, very spicy there, and we use a lot of shrimp paste in that region of the country. And my mom is from Battambang, and Battambang has probably the best food in the country. Um, every time I go to Battambang, the first thing I want is just to go out and eat 3 or 4 times a day. And I think my mom can probably talk a little bit more about what the food is like over there. I know her amok is the best I've ever tasted in my life, and I know I'm biased, but We have
Yeah, and talk about the UNESCO recognition that Battambang has
Yeah.
received.
I think it was recently, maybe a couple months ago, UNESCO.
Creative City of
Yeah.
Gastronomy, I think is what
Yeah.
they called it.
That was incredible, and I think my mom was extremely proud to know that the cuisine of her hometown is recognized across the world.
Yeah, pick that up, Chantha. Tell us about what's special about the cuisine of Battambang and your memories of eating there when you were young.
It's as I remember as a child, we are proud to be people from Battambang. Uh, it's like a distinguished word to talk to people in from other regions. We are from Battambang, and that's the pride we had first of all, and still have nowadays. Um, and because food from Battambang is the most famous, the best in the country. So, and for me, my mother is the best cook in Battambang. Um, I have no idea, but I have friends around my neighborhood. They don't have much like I did. We were the same age, but they didn't have everything like I had in my house, and so for that reason, my mother had the condition to buy the best food to serve the family, and so like my favorite breakfast is nôm bánh chọc. Nôm bánh chọc tức sầm ló Khmer means fish sauce to put on a rice noodle, and in Battambang we and it's in the last in recently the Cambodian government made it a national dish of Cambodia, nôm bánh chọc. But if you want the base, you have to call it nôm bánh chọc Battambang. We have some special sauce made of red chili paste cooked in coconut milk and add palm sugar in it, made it taste sweet and more milky. So the nôm bánh chọc serve, and the seller will pour a big spoon of that paste,ទឹកអំរិត on the top, and you cannot find it anywhere in Cambodia but Battambang, and that's something very special. And again, the amok. So people recognize amok from Battambang is the best. Everybody in Cambodia, as well as the UNESCO.
And then a subset of the best is your amok, which is the best of the best.
Yes.
And that's kind of, like you said, Clara, not only do regions have their specialties, but every family has its own version of whatever the cuisine is. So like Chantha's mother and Chantha herself, she cooks French dishes, she cooks Vietnamese dishes, she cooks Khmer dishes. And then, so Clara, what's the first thing you learned to cook when you were younger?
I actually did not learn how to cook a full meal for myself until I moved to the US. But before, when I was younger, I spent a lot of time in the kitchen with my mom, chopping vegetables and doing the things that are probably not the most fun part of cooking, like picking morning glory leaves and peeling garlic and learning how to hold a knife properly and safely. But the first thing I did learn how to cook when I was maybe 8 years old was rice, learning how to cook rice over charcoal fire. And it is very difficult. I had to learn how to start a fire, how to make a charcoal fire. And my dad, I think, like my grandfather, my mom used to describe my grandparents' relationship as my grandfather was a very picky eater with a very, very good cook for a wife. And I think that was the case with my parents as well. My dad was very picky, and in certain dishes, like for example, rice, um, it has to be cooked perfectly. It had to be fluff. It can't be too soggy or too cooked too hard. And So it was my responsibility to cook rice when I was younger, just because it didn't matter if I burned the rice or if I undercooked it, my dad will eat it without complaint. And so it saved us a lot of arguments at the dinner table. And so I learned how to cook rice when I was 8 years old. But I started to cook more when I moved away from home and came to the US for college. I missed home food so much. I couldn't eat any of the food at the cafeteria. And so the first dish I learned was mi cha, which is fried noodles, and I cooked it for all of my friends in my dorms and university. And then I started to learn to cook more. I called my mom in the middle of the night because of the 12 to 13 hours difference in timing. So I remember there were times when I was staying up late until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning with a boiling pot of pork stock, trying to talk to my mom and asking her questions about how to make the perfect pork broth. And I've collected recipes, dozens and dozens of recipes from my mom over the years, and there are no measurements on those recipes. There were instructions, very, very basic instructions on how to make all kinds of dishes. Most of them were my favorite dishes, and I'm sure that she still has hundreds of recipes that I still don't know how to make. And I printed all the recipes out in a book, and I still open it. I still read it. I still use it till today in my kitchen, and it's something that I truly treasure.
It's like part of your inheritance.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Clara has been really, really helpful in she's been the recipe translator in a way so that we could, because Chantha she's so skilled and has such instincts in the kitchen that it's hard for her to talk to someone like me who really not only is not nearly as good a cook, but I don't know Cambodian foodways, or at least I didn't when I started. So I kind of needed Clara to be a go-between to help me understand how to get the recipes onto the page so that even someone like me who didn't have any experience in Cambodian cooking could make the recipes and get them at least close in taste to the original. And mi cha is the first dish that you taught me as well. That recipe is the last recipe in the book, and it's a great starting point for anybody who wants to take a first try at these recipes. So, and the book is filled with recipes. Some of them are literally things that you will cook, hopefully, but some of them are a little bit less literal, like they're metaphors, even poems, or they're dishes or memories that define a time and a place in Chantha's life story. So Clara, would you read from page 211, the Morning Glories story?
Yes. So this was the time when my mom was in the Thai refugee camp. Right. In Sikyo, the authorities allotted detainees small garden plots where we could grow herbs and vegetables, healthy, fresh food to augment our rations. A popular favorite among Khmer refugees was the morning glory, a tenacious weed and a nutritious culinary treasure. There are more than 1,000 varieties of morning glory. This edible one, so beloved by Cambodians, is Ipomea aquatica, a floating vine that goes by many aliases: water spinach, kangkong, ong choy, swamp cabbage, and water convolvulus, to name a few. It is a stubborn survivor native to Asia. In Khmer, we call it trokun. In Cambodian villages, I aquatica is life itself, a fast-growing leafy green vegetable you can grow year-round in a tiny village garden, rich in vitamins and minerals, and excellent for supplementing diets of rice and river fish. It thrives in irrigation canals and drainage ditches, invades waterways, snarls boat traffic, flourishes under neglect, and quite simply refuses to die. It is as stubborn in clinging to life as the villagers themselves are. And like us refugees, I Aquatica also endured setbacks. The gardens were flanked by a canal flowing with raw sewage, and a few enthusiastic gardeners poured the sewer water over the tender new shoots, water and fertilizer all in one. Those fertilized greens spurred a cholera pandemic in Sikyo. The sickness was so widespread that we heard Bangkok ran low on oral rehydration solution, ORS. As an emergency measure, Médecins Sans Frontières taught us health workers to mix homemade ORS, 20 parts water to 1 of salt and 7 of sugar. Many emergency truckloads of water rolled into our camp during the worst of the epidemic. After that, the Thai MOI police destroyed the gardens. No more morning glory. The story of the morning glory is the refugee's story. When you must flee and can carry only one thing, what will it be? What single seed from your old life will be the most useful in helping you sow a new one? Unlike Jen and me, the morning glory achieved refugee status. The plant crossed an ocean, reached for the American dream, and won. I Aquatica was an immigrant in America, only recently naturalized. Someone quietly introduced it to Florida sometime in the 1970s. Sunshine State, please allow me to present I Aquatica, declared some penniless refugee in Vietnamese or Khmer or Lao, casting the precious seeds into a subtropical bog, imagining the delicious soup garnishes that would rise from the murky water. The plant was a successful expatriate, providing subsistence and income for refugees in subtropical southern pockets of the U.S. After the wars, a few dozen Khmer families settled south of Houston and turned morning glory farming into an industry, selling I Aquatica to Asian markets and restaurants all over Texas. Eventually, Texas Parks and Wildlife managers discovered I Aquatica infiltrating the area near Galveston Bay. They added the plant to the USDA's noxious weeds list and declared it illegal to cultivate, a mortal threat to native flora. But one man's noxious weed is another man's stir fry, or a refugee's survival strategy. After several heated town council meetings, officials deemed I Aquatica a low-risk exotic species, one that could coexist peacefully with Texas plant life if growers avoided seeding it into the wilds and waterways. Other states like Florida, California, and Georgia have recognized the culinary usefulness of this resilient plant and allowed it to be cultivated carefully. It offered a generation of new Cambodian Americans and other Southeast Asian immigrants a way to convert the recipes of their past into their own American dream, a big accomplishment for a humble vine. And right here, there is a recipe called the American Dream Morning Glory Stir Fried, and I won't read it, but it is available in the book.
Which we're gonna be cooking a lot of morning glory. Tomorrow we're having a Cambodian pop up at our friend's restaurant, and we just bought all the trakuon they had at the market. So yeah, I really love that. Clara chose that passage. I think it's one of your favorites, right?
Yeah, it is.
And it's this kind. I think of it as, a way that I'm sure a lot of the people who are watching and listening right now may have spent time in refugee camps, and when you spend years there, you can't just wait for your life to begin. As Chantha told me when we were talking, you have to make a life for yourselves there through friendship, work, or maybe a taste of something familiar from home, which is what the morning glory was in this story. Chantha, what is it like for you? You tend to remember your life through flavors and aromas. Tell us what that is like.
I am sure everyone has a memory about the smell, the aroma in the past. And for me, my mother called me puppy because I can smell the extra lime she put in her soup. And why did you put it for yourself? You don't put it for me. And since she called me puppy because I have a nose of a puppy. And I remember, and when we lost everything, all those smells come back to me, and to help me survive. when I had nothing to eat, I just dream about those dishes I used to have. Um, and it helped me to swallow whatever bad food I had at that moment. It's like we had a story like the poor farmer had no food, but she has a wooden fish. She for her to look at every time she eats her rice with fish sauce or salt, and that's me with my memory about food. It helps me to survive.
Thank you so much, Chantha. And I think we're kind of coming toward the end here. But I think a huge takeaway for all of us from what we've heard is that we tell our life stories to make sense of the things that we've lived through after the fact, like that morning glory story, and like how one of my favorite poets, who is also a friend of mine, wrote in a poem that loving something can save us. And I think Chantha loved her mother's cooking and Cambodian cooking, her mother's recipes, and looking back on that food and those food memories, the happy memories, has brought into focus what she now realizes is her philosophy. So I'm going to get Claire to do one last quick reading on page 4.
Yes. My mother's slow noodles philosophy in the kitchen has become a philosophy for life. From her, I learned that the best dishes require extra time and patience to prepare. Later, I discovered that the path from hunger and poverty to economic self-reliance is long and hard, if it is even possible. And I see now that rebuilding a traumatized society after genocide takes many generations of investment. There are no quick fixes. That's what slow noodles means to me.
So, and there we have, that's where the title came from, obviously, Chantha's Slow Noodles philosophy. So, Chantha, can you just kind of expand on that philosophy and what it means to you? And then this can relate back to the baba bankan recipe that you talked about earlier.
Um, uh, yeah. First of all, I remember if you want to make a good dish, the better dish, the more time you spend, the more love, the more care you put in. And later in life, when with my own experience, I don't see any way slow that I can get out of the bottom, the rock bottom I was in, but with a lot of hope and and resilience, working really hard, like you have no other choice. Then we slowly came back to life, and I applied that philosophy into the center, the Stung Treng Women's Development Center, to the women who never been to school, who knew nothing, who had no knowledge about health, about education, but um, they spend years working with us, and they have the first thing they bought from their salary they earn from the weaving. um, the first thing they bought was the pair of earrings. That's the most important for a Khmer girl to own, but they had none of it before they came to the center. So that's the first sign. And they have smaller families, less children, and they send them to school. But it took them 10 years to be able to reach that stage. So that's a very, very slow noodles and put a lot of care, put a lot of work into it. That's slow noodles mean to us. And also, the slow noodle ways will help people to to look at, like, when you lose everything in life, you have nothing else, but it's not the end of the story. It's not the end of your life. It's always a slow noodle ways to help you to get out, and that's what I hope people can look at it and take it away.
Thank you so much, Chanta. And if you would just briefly hold up the book for everyone, I think now that you've heard from Chanta and Clara for the past hour, you can see why I was so inspired to work with them and how honored I've been that they chose to share their stories with me. We've become close, we're friends, and it has absolutely changed my life to know these two. I'm so happy that we got to do this project together. So that's the end of our presentation. You know, the idea that making something beautiful and worthwhile requires a lot of time and care and love. And that's what we three have done together too. I'd like to think. So Clara is going to take questions now.
Yes, I see a couple of questions here. Just to kind of piggyback on what my mom was saying earlier about the Women's Center, I think Greg asked, "Can you talk about the strength of women in this book?" I think that's such a relevant um, piece, part of this whole project. Maybe Mom can talk a little bit about that as well.
Can you repeat the questions,
Yes.
please?
Can you talk about the strength of women in this book?
Um, I believe as myself, and I see in so many women I met in my life, including the women at our center. Every woman has such a super strength in them. Um, and when a woman in vulnerability because she didn't have enough support or she didn't know how. But once you provide just the smallest support, she can be on her feet and do it and bend her head. And especially if she's a mother of some children, she will do whatever it takes um, for her children. So, and I believe every woman in this world has the same sense of, to be strong. And that's the strength of a woman.
Yeah.
Other questions?
I actually would like to add to that. I think this particular project this kind of describes that as well, because it's a story about my mom, who I believe has this incredible strength to go through all of these terrible things that I cannot imagine, and to be able to rebuild her life and to dedicate her life into helping other people do the same. I think that takes incredible strength. And for you to work on this project, two women from two different worlds, different stories, came together and worked on this project that took over a decade. I think that also takes incredible strength and dedication. And I think my grandmother, my aunt, my mom's older sister in the book, they're incredibly strong women. And also the women at the nonprofit organization to decide to change your life and to be independent, for women in with no education, with an upbringing that requires them to dedicate their life into taking care of their siblings and children, and to want to change and to have agency in their life. That takes incredible strength. So I'm incredibly proud of this project. And so I think this question I would like for you to answer, Kim. So as we, there are a lot of recipes in this book, literal recipes for cooking, but also metaphorically as well. And so the question is, how did you decide which part of the story to have those beautiful poetic recipes, and how did you decide, and how did you come up with them in the first place?
I think they all, of course, came from stories that Chanta told me. And I thought there were some moments in her story that were so emotionally powerful, that I thought they deserved something spare like poetry. And sometimes it felt like those recipes could could stand in for just regular storytelling and would offer the, I don't know, would offer the a more powerful emotional resonance than just telling the story outright. But also, one of the book reviewers actually said this, and I never thought about that, but a recipe is in the form of directives. So in a way, a lot of these recipes are ways for Chantha to channel her life story into like suggestions for how to survive something difficult. And I liked that idea of the imperative coming through the recipes, the metaphorical recipes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The first time I read the book, I was very surprised, and I loved that.
But
That
also you know, what you may not be able to tell from this discussion is when we three are all together and we're cooking a meal, Chantha has a very just an incredibly pointy, hilarious sense of humor. She can be very wry. And so to me, some of the recipes that have like a very biting sense of humor were a way to let her voice come through.
Yes.
And sometimes even her humor.
Yeah. I think Cambodian people in general are very funny, and I think, you know, when you've gone through so much trauma, I think humor is a way for you to maybe makes the difficult conversation a little bit easier to talk about. And I had never really noticed that until I came to the US. And the first time people hear me make a joke, they kind of raise their eyebrow a little bit. And that's a little bit dark, but that's just how Cambodians are. And I think in any groups of minorities or people who have gone through such trauma, I think humor is just a way for us to almost self-preserve a little bit
I
too.
think so too. And sometimes it can be very, very dark humor.
Yeah.
And then you know, the bottom line though is as I got to know Chantha, I could see that cooking and recipes are her language of love and her artistry, because she is a true artist in the kitchen. And so, and she can also she's pretty good at directing us in the kitchen. So like that imperative mood of the recipes, it just felt like her to me.
Yeah, that voice that I can hear above my shoulders.
Yeah.
She's right here.
Don't do it that way. Do it this way.
All right, I think we can answer maybe two more questions. This one, I think it kind of ties back to a lot of our discussion about this book and why we want to approach it and talk about it through recipes. So, Laura said that you know, a lot of people have said that they have parents and grandparents who would not talk about the trauma during Pol Pot time or Khmer Rouge time. Um, do you think, maybe mom, that, you know, if we create events that build around food and cooking, do you think that can help people process their trauma in the same way that, you know, it has helped us talk about it in this book?
This is
Me?
for you, Chantha.
Can I
Yes.
answer? Yes. In our culture, we men don't talk about ourselves, let alone our pain. We are not allowed to tell our neighbor what's happening inside our family, and and so because of the culture and with the chapsari and also like my mother, when the last few years of her life, she talked less and less and less, and I did not know that it's the trauma she had been bearing, and it happened to me like we don't want to talk about it. I don't want to see anybody when I'm in pain. Um, and it came out like we with friends in Cambodia, we cooked together and we had a Sunday meal, but then it came out in very normal way and natural, like one friend would say, oh, we don't throw the banana skin away during Pol Pot time, so that we have more food. And it's and she laughed, but somebody cried. I cried. Um, we are not human, but we had to survive. But anyway, while cooking, the story came out more easily, especially like me in my case. Um, we talk about food, and like Clara said before, after I tell the story, at least I don't bury it inside like a landmine. It can explode. But when I'm saying it out, um, it's a therapy. That's a pain you go, and when you talk about it, it's the therapy, it's a massage. Um, it causes more pain at that minute when we don't throw the banana skin away, and that story stick in my head among of my own story. Um, um, so when we say it out, we were able to laugh about it, and it's healing. It helps me to face the pain in a less painful way, and I can say it again the next time with even less pain. um, so I would strongly recommend uh, people who live in trauma like myself should say it out. And especially we need someone to listen. That's more important than saying it out. if um if nobody listen, then it's in a very gentle way, like Kim approached me. It's very personal. I don't want to share it with anybody. But when once you started it, you can do it again. You can continue until you can release your pain and um, partly let it go, because it's not gonna go away. It's your life. But yes, telling the story has helped me massively. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I think I mentioned this earlier as well, and I think, you know, my dad is exactly the same. He cannot talk about the trauma and the experience that he had. But once in a while we're eating, I would sneak up a question, and you know, most of the time he will dismiss it, but if he's in a good mood, he might share just a little bit of what he went through, and I think those moments usually is when we're eating or doing something together, just the two of us, and I think being able to listen is and be compassionate and sit there and truly listen is can be really difficult, and I did not know how to do that when I was younger. And it's I think it is important, like my mom mentioned, is to be an active and a good listener. It's really important for people to process their trauma. One last question from Sydney. I think I will answer this question. So, Mom, she did say that, or they did say that you're inspiring, and thank you for today. But her question is, will your book be available in Khmer? And we have talked about this amongst ourselves, and we were thinking about what happens now that the book is out. What is our next thing for Slow Noodles? And for me personally, having this book be translated and available in Khmer is very important for us, and we'll figure it out. We don't know when that is going to be available, but that's going to be my next project, and to make that happen and have it available in Cambodia and also in the US as well, to our Khmer community here.
We would love to make that happen. We're not sure yet how to make that happen,
Yes.
but we certainly, it's a priority. I think it's very important because we've already spoken with several Cambodian Americans, and it seems like they are receiving this book very well. The idea of having a voice, and for that voice to be in Khmer, that would be really special.
Yes.
And I think with that, we can say we'll wrap up. And we are so honored to be your guests today. And it's especially wonderful to be able to speak with the Khmer American community in Lowell and perhaps in Boston too. Thank you so much.